Linux is pretty well known by geeks and nerds even outside the IT industry. It is said to be a reliable and customizable system. It's well documented and useful when need to get work done. It has many qualities and also many features and usages. My part is going to be a small list of those features and usages. In Windows you have the typical desktop environment that everyone knows, changing with every versions. But with Linux distributions, your desktop environment is customizable. Having full control over your system is a key feature in Linux distributions, and customizing their desktop environments became a sport between Linux enthusiasts. But what if you don't want to use this plethora of graphical interfaces? You can. Another funny Linux feature, Linux Terminal Command Line. What? Of course it is funny. Due to its affiliation with Unix, Command Line Terminal comes with any Linux distribution, and it's very useful for performing basic tasks like managing files. And if you want to use Linux like every other system, you can. Music, web browser, video, and sound editing that made me struggle to make this presentation are available to you. The vast majority are free software, a definition that Bartosz already explained, and these programs can also be launched by using the command line. Now we're going to talk about how and the why individuals and companies use Linux. You may still doubt that you're gonna make a great use of Linux, but still want to try it. A very common first use of Linux is made on what we call a virtual machine. But what exactly is a virtual machine? To make it very simple, a virtual machine is a software that behaves like a computer. It's what we call emulation. The host, physical computer, runs a guest, virtual computer. And for most people that are learning Linux, running it as a guest on a virtual machine is a common first step. But Linux is not only meant to run on a virtual machine. It also provides a lot of solution when virtualizing an operating system is needed, and it has an appeal for companies. Like in servers, when having 10 machines running in one is a huge financial advantage. It's a great transition to the next part of my presentation, Linux in the networking area. Internet is the biggest achievement made in the history of mankind, and Linux is used in 90% of the network market. I thought it could be interesting to talk a bit about it. Servers, switches, and so on are for the big part running Linux. But why is that? As I said before, Linux is reliable but also secure. I will talk about it later. And if you vote, pay your taxes, or do all your administrative stuff online, the machines involved need those qualities. But why Linux came in this area in the first place? Back then, the only used operating system was Unix, the ancestor of Linux, and for companies and techs the transition was obvious. Very similar in the core system, so no need to train your staff again, and also, Linux is free. But what if a server needs to perform a special task, web page, database, mailing, etc.? Then Linux is perfectly fitted for the job. Remember, the code is free access, and it can be rewritten depending on your needs. We will see that this feature is a part of the Linux success. Let's focus on one of those special roles, security. I'm personally a big fan of security. Hacker culture and cracking is my passion. And Linux also provides a lot of tools to hacking and cracking, but also for protecting. The security is a main concern on Linux systems. The access is partitioned between users. You have the root user, the account that gives you access to everything on the machine. It is protected by passwords and encrypted files containing them. You can also create other groups or users that can access unpredefined files. Firewalls, for example, are a big deal in security. Their role is pretty simple. They are the limit between your personal network, like your Wi-Fi at home, and the cruel outside world of the Internet. What it does is analyzing the data entering the network and rejecting it if needed. So we've seen that Linux was a great deal in networking and security, but we're not done with it yet. In fact, it may be closer to you than you think. Due to its portability, we can encounter it also on embedded systems. Now, a short presentation of what is embedded. An embedded system is a small piece of electronics, the size of a credit card, programmable and made for specific tasks. You may have already seen those small pieces like the one on the slide. The first use of it in history was the Apollo guidance computer, the navigation board in the Apollo mission rockets. It is used on control systems of all kinds, toys, home appliances, etc. But in the past decade, CPUs became smaller and a lot more powerful. It is the Moore's law. Linux could now spread on those little machines, and that led to a well-known Linux distribution used by many people nowadays, Android. Android is based on a Linux kernel, more specifically the Android open source project. With Android, you can have a command line terminal and even run Linux programs. The main concern here is that Android CPUs are less powerful. No problem, the core has been rewritten to fit in these smaller pieces of electronics. Another embedded system running Linux is Raspberry Pi. You may have heard about it. It's in fact a nanocomputer that can be used like any desktop, but also for making small electronics projects, emulating retro games and more. And Raspbian, the Raspberry OS, is a remix of the famous Debian. To conclude, Linux, because of its modularity, has spread around the world. The free software made Linux stronger. Now, a small activity. Imagine your own OS, its logo, its purpose, its philosophy. And that's gonna end my presentation. Thank you for listening.